All right, we are back with another live episode of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. This is our Friday edition as we get ready to head into the weekend. And we love football so much, we thought we'd bring the group back and talk about spring practice again. I know Curt and Bob did a little bit of putting some finishing touches on the program on Monday. Obviously, they still have one more day of practice to go. Jerry and I were on the road doing various other things, so we thought we'd circle back to football. Obviously, a lot of news coming out of the football program in the way of portal. We've had 4 players enter the portal over the last week. We'll talk a little bit about that. FSU now at 83 scholarships by our math. We'll talk a little bit about where we think they could do, what they could do with those 2 scholarships. Obviously, had the Billy Sexton event over the weekend that Jerry helped run, and we'll talk to Jerry a little bit that as we get ready to close out the show. But my name is Pat Burnham. I'll be your host for today. I'm joined by editor Bob Ferrante, owner Jerry Kutz, and senior writer Curt Weiler. Guys, how's everything going?
Great. How are you?
Doing wonderful. It's almost a weekend, and a weekend that, by comparative purposes, very little work, although my trip to Lake Blackshear has been canceled. But other than that, looking forward to kind of a low-key weekend compared to last week's crazy weekend in Atlanta covering the top 250 rivals camp on Sunday. But anyway, guys, a lot going on. We did see Florida State wrap up spring practice. And Curt and Bob, this may be repetitive for you guys. We probably got some people watching today that did not watch on Monday, but just want to go through the group, your overall impressions of Florida State coming out of the spring practice period for 2023.
You know, I think we've hit on the storyline so much that, I fear that readers and listeners get tired of it. But I think when you put it in perspective to how far this program has come, 2020, 2021, even last spring, the depth on the roster at a number of position groups. Mike Norvell has strengthened tight end this spring, has strengthened the defensive tackle position. We've seen Gilbert Edmond at defensive end. You feel better about some of those weaker position groups coming out of, say, the fall, coming out of the spring of 2022. So better competition, better depth. I think this roster is just coming a long way. In his motto of climb, I think the roster is climbing in a direction that's very, very positive.
Yeah, and we'll get into position groups we feel best about, had the most questions about as we get into the show. But I agree with you. I think what we learned about in its general theme, this is the deepest team that Mike Norvell's had. It's the most talented team he's had, and now I think what we want to see is what kind of personality this team develops in the offseason program as it gets ready to head into fall camp. And we all had a strong sense of this team's personality when we got to camp last year. It'll be interesting to see what kind of, to use the modern term, vibe we get from this team when they hit the field in August of 2023. Curt, just your overall before we break it down into individual position groups.
Yeah, I mean, to tie it back into the climb metaphor analogy that Mike Norvell uses, I'm interested to see how come fall how close to the top of the staircase, the ladder, the mountain, whatever we're climbing this team is. I think they're pretty close. I mean, nothing I saw this spring dissuaded me from believing this team could have ACC aspirations, make it into the college football playoff aspirations. I think it's kind of driven home that if things break right for them, that is a distinct possibility for this team.
Yeah, and listen, there's been some things that have happened that are concerning. We'll talk about the depth at linebacker with losing 2 guys that really now you have a huge question on defense that you didn't have 7 days ago. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But Jerry, a little bit about your overall impressions of what you saw during the spring.
To play off what Curt just said, I like the morale. I like at the end of the day, it's a team sport, and it seems like this team really likes each other, and they're cohesive, and they seem to have the pieces. They have complementary pieces, certainly on offense. Score a lot of points. To your point, Pat, on defense, I like the starters at linebacker. It's just the depth they've got to address, I think, in the offseason.
Yeah. Yeah, well, listen, I think we were all, I think we all came out of spring practice more excited than we were going into spring practice based off what we'd seen. And I think that our expectations about what this team has the potential to do are probably a little bit higher now than they were, say, March 11th, whenever the first spring practice was. I can't remember the actual date, but listen, we understand why fans are excited. As you said, we've seen some younger kids develop. We're going to get into a little bit of that as we go forward. And since we don't want to hammer this out again too much, but one of the things I did want to address with you guys, we've been there for most of the spring practices, and we'll have some articles on this moving forward. Saturday, we're going to come out with, we each make an argument for our most improved position group coming out of spring. But and this is not that argument, but just the position group guys that you feel best about on offense and defense coming out of spring practice. I'm going to limit you to one on each side of the ball, one position on each side of the ball. There can't be and or on this one. I'm going to give you chances to have more than one option as we go through the show. But for this one, it's got to be one position. And Bob, I'll start with you.
Yeah, Pat, I'm going to have to tip the hat to the offensive line. You and Mark Salvin might be happy with this one. Again, just how far the offensive line has come in quality and quantity since 2020. Again, it's been incremental growth through the transfer portal, through player development. The offensive line is really in a spot where I think it's remarkable. If you went back in time and said how good it was going to be to Florida State fans, they may not believe you that Florida State could attract this many transfers, could keep as many of the younger guys and develop them. So offensive line, I think, is a really bright spot for the Seminoles. Same thing on the defensive line, too. It just feels like...
Hey, you only get one. Stop it.
He gets one on each side of the ball, Jerry.
Okay.
Mr. Getting home actually.
Come on. All right, here we go.
All right. Defensive line, as I was saying, Jerry. Hey, if Florida State gets that waiver for Darrell Jackson, and it's still an if, it's still hanging out there, but man, is there a collection of crazy talent at end and tackle? And look, John Papucha said they want to rotate 5 defensive ends. That's great news because they've got more than 5. They've got a lot of guys with experience. Defensive tackle, we know Odell wants at least 4, but he'd love to have guys he can develop, younger guys for the future too. They've got tons of them. I don't know the last time they've had this many experienced ends and tackles. I mean, we could go back through rosters and, start charts and all that through history, but it feels like it's been a while since they've been in this good of a spot on the defensive line. And if I called that 2 positions, end and tackle, I'm cheating and making that defensive line. That's why my reasoning is for what it is.
You did sneak an extra position in there. Good for you. Good for you. But, and I don't disagree with you on the defensive tackles. And I'll get into my spill about that later. Curt, your favorite position or the position you feel best about on offense?
Looking at the offense, I'll vary. I mean, offensive line is a good one. I could easily follow in those footsteps. For the sake of variety, especially relative to last year, I'll point to the tight ends. I think we saw really both the transfers this spring looked the part of what you thought you were getting. Jaheim Bell, they're going to use him a bunch of different ways. He's pretty fun to watch and what he can do with the ball in his hands, what he can do in space. And Kyle Morlock, I thought, made the transition from D2 to FBS. We had real questions about that. I thought he made it really well and looked the part and was a pretty frequent receiving target and moves really well, is really fast for how big he is. I mean, could almost play some receiver, truthfully. I mean, you see some Johnny Wilson there with how well he moves at his size. Marquise Douglas, not to get lost in there after a breakout season. I liked what I saw from him this spring. And I mean, even adding in, Preston Daniels, kind of a known commodity who's been around, been playing for you really since he was a true freshman. And I liked a step forward from Jarrell Powers. It felt like Jarrell Powers never really got up to speed last year. He was a guy who arrived over the summer. That makes things tougher for playing right away when kind of you miss out on that spring as an early enrollee. But I've seen really the strides from him. I mean, he's the more prototypical tight end of the 2 they brought in last year. And I think he started to show that more this spring.
Jerry?
I'm gonna go with Bob on the offensive line, and but the only thing I would add is, to the amazement of it, is how many people that involves. when you talk about like quarterback, it's one guy, one starter. On the offensive line, it's five starters. And so to flip the roster at a position with five starters is really, really amazing. It's really saying something what they achieved. So that to me is my offensive position. On the defensive line, I'm not going to cheat and say ends too. I'll stick with the tackles. I think the tackles are much improved with depth, mostly with depth. And if the Miami transfer is eligible, I think he adds the missing link in the sense that he's a potential first-round draft pick. I think that's a guy that can change he's a game changer. And I'm not sure the other guys are. I think the other guys are really good players, but I'm not sure they're especially dynamic. And I think you have to have one of those. And so that would be my pick on defense, would be the defensive line. Is the depth is much better than it has been.
Yeah, well, I could just say quarterback for offense and be done with it because Jordan Travis entering his fourth year as a starter, surrounded by all the talent he's going to have. It should have his best season ever. But I'm going to stick up front with you guys, and I'm going to give you a little bit more of a reason why. First of all, Florida State returns five starters from a year ago. And then you lose Turnentine and Gibbons and a couple other guys at graduation or transferring out. And you replace them with Jeremiah Byers, Casey Roddick, and Keandre Jones, who have combined played 5,200 snaps of college football over the course of their careers prior to getting to Florida State. You don't find that kind of experience until this portal came. And listen, you got five guys that have starting experience returning in addition to that. And it's such an improved position that there are guys that started last year that may not start this year. That's how competitive this fall camp. You have Bless Harris, Robert Scott Jr., and Jeremiah Byers. The battle for playing time at the two offensive tackle spots, and you haven't even talked about Julian Armella, who we started seeing improvement from as the spring went on. And then, of course, you've got Jarius Washington, who's played three different positions for Florida State and started games there. Does he ultimately find a home? So, listen, I think between some natural progression from your younger guys and the blend of experience they've brought in, I think it is the most improved position group. And I'll have more on that when we have our position group improvement story. So, I think it's the offensive line all the way. Again, 5,200 snaps worth of experience brought in over three players. And one of them is an all-conference player. The other one has some leadership qualities like Dylan Gibbons and Casey Roddick. And obviously, Keandre Jones started in the SEC as a redshirt freshman. So, to me, that's the group that's improved the most on offensive line. It's hard to believe that we are saying that they could, in reality, be legitimately too deep at every position. And to go further, my point, for some of these young guys that are having to learn different sides of the ball and different positions, maybe having stability and being able to hammer in on one position speeds up their development, whether it's right guard, left tackle, center, because they're not having to learn footwork from two different sides and all of that kind of thing. So I think it's offensive line. And then I'm going to stick close to the ball on the defense. And I'm going defensive tackle. Obviously, it's easy. Darrell Jackson and Josh Farmer were absolutely dominant during the spring. Dennis Briggs, we know, is a player. He's had very good success at defensive tackle. And then we haven't even talked about Fabian Lovett, who had his best spring since he's been here. And then you got Braden Fisk, who's not even taken a snap yet, and he was an all-conference performer at the MAC at Western Michigan. So I think those are my two, and I'm not even sure that we saw the wide receivers, a couple of young guys look really good there. But anyway, I'm going with offensive line. All right. So we're pretty much in agreement on that, which makes me feel pretty good. We got some consensus, and usually consensus is good. All right, so the position group coming out of the spring, one on offense and one on defense that you have the most questions about. And, Jerry, I'll let you start.
Well, depth at linebacker would be my question on defense. I thought losing Gant kind of hurt because Gant was a guy that on your obvious passing downs could help you. And in my research, I realized that, we forget in the fall we lost Gaynor. And so you've lost 3 linebackers that had a lot of playing time. Gant played a lot as he played more 2 years ago actually than he did last year. And so you lose some 94 games of experience in those 3 guys. And I like the 3 starters, but I do think we're going to have to find some answers. And Omar Graham is certainly one prospect. You have some incoming freshmen that could be. I'm excited to see Nicholson in the fall. I think he's a guy that can cover a back or a tight end in space. But I'd really like to see him go get a transfer if they can find the right fit.
Yeah. Listen, I agree with you. I don't want to try to plug a square hole into a round peg or whatever the saying is, round peg into a square hole. You know what I mean? I don't want to try to force somebody into the program that's not a good fit. But I do agree with you. I think I had questions about depth at linebacker before the Gant decision and Dick's decision. Now you've got 7 linebackers on scholarship on campus in the fall, including the 2 true freshmen. So now you have 4 of your 7 scholarship linebackers who are redshirt freshmen or true freshmen. I think it went from a position you have questions from to now a position that really you have concerns about as the roster currently sits and could be a deficiency in what should be a very strong team. I think they have – listen, again, don't go out and pick a guy just for filling up a roster spot, but we're going to see guys enter the transfer portal each and every day, and I've got to think that Mike Norvell and Randy Shannon are paying very close attention to who's entering the portal. And as we all know, there's all kind of things going on behind the scenes with the transfer portal. These kids are not just entering the portal blind, and these coaches at all schools are paying attention to what's going on. They all talk. So I think they will add somebody at linebacker, and I think they have to if this team is going to be as good as what we think it's going to. Be.
And then there could be changes within the roster as well. I mean, I can see a safety that could be used in the box on the obvious passing downs. Shaheem Brown comes to mind for me, but if he's a major factor at safety, do you move him down the box on the 3rd and long situations, or could a guy from offense come over? But at any rate, I
know which 2 guys you're talking about too. I can read your mind. You want to see Josh Burrell and Brian Courtney as linebackers.
If it were up to Jerry, the scholarship
I'd take a look at them.
Linebackers.
What's that?
If it were up to Jerry, the scholarship roster would be 85 linebackers.
Yeah, pretty much. But anyway, I like runners and hitters and people with bad intentions when they get there. So that's usually who they are. But at any rate, long story, that would be my defensive concern. On offense, gosh, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I almost don't have one.
That was what I was going to say, Jerry, is my take is, I mean, to have some variety, I don't really have one when you look at the offenses. I mean, y'all all 3 talked about offensive line, and I think it is, don't get me wrong. I think when you look at overall the depth they have and everything, but I think it's partially y'all are all 3 focused on it because of what we went through with 2018, with 2019, how bad it was a matter of a mere years ago.
We're scarred, Curt. We are scarred.
The PTSD from that is very real for us all, and it's totally understandable from the fan base. I mean, the fan base kind of feels like this offensive line is a reward for having to go through those years in the wilderness from an offensive line standpoint. But it's not like we're all praising the offensive line, or I talked about tight ends because we're worried about anything else. I mean, like you said, Jordan Travis, a Heisman front runner probably entering the year, and even the depth behind him. I think we are all liked what we saw from that group this spring. Running back, even when you lose Trayshawn Ward, running back, I think, is in great shape with Rodney Hill, with Lawrence Toafili, with Trey Benson, the expected starter. I think even, CJ Campbell is a guy we didn't see Keziah Holmes in the spring game, but we liked what we saw from him before he went down in the spring. The wide receiver, they were a bit banged up there as spring went on, but still, I think you liked, from knowing what you have in Johnny Wilson to Kentron Portier being maybe the best, most impressive player this spring to the true freshman coming in. Especially come by the time fall rolls around, I think that position's going to be in great shape. I think it's fair to say there's a reason why all are like, hey, maybe look at the portal are on the defensive side of the ball. I think you really feel good about that offensive roster top to bottom.
Let me say this. I want to interject there. I think most of our listeners who don't have the benefit of being able to go out and watch practice like we do probably have a concern as the backup quarterback.
That was exactly what I was going to say. That to me, that's the question on offense is who's number 2 at quarterback.
But those of us who have watched practice, including, all 4 of us have, I feel much better about Rodemaker and AJ, and I like him. And I think that Rodemaker, you listen, if Travis goes down, there's going to be a drop-off. There'll be a drop-off between Travis and whoever Clemson starts.
For sure.
Right? When you lose your starter, there's going to be a drop-off. But I think Rodemaker and Duffy have accounted well for themselves this spring. I feel much better about that.
They better because they got one coming.
Flashback to, Pat and I sitting in that Louisville press box last year when Jordan went down and it looked like a serious injury, and the fan base is freaking out about like how many more games are we going to be able to win with Tate? If Tate had to play a whole season right now, especially when you look at the schedule and the schedule being front loaded, I think Tate could get you what? How many wins could Tate do we think with the offensive talent around him, with how high we are on the defense for the most part? Could he get you 7-8 wins?
I think so.
He's not getting you to a playoff. He's probably not winning you the ACC as things currently stand, but I think you feel much more comfortable. Yeah. And it's beyond just the Louisville game. It's what we've seen this spring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Listen, I think you got to feel as if they can run the ball effectively, which we think they should be able to, right? Yeah. The offensive line is better. You've got better receivers around you. That they complement each other, right? They're going to open up some opportunities. So I think, listen, you certainly don't want Jordan to go down. He gives you a chance to compete for the ACC championship at the very least, based on what we think we've seen from this team. But certainly, I think that you'd have to, with where they are at a depth standpoint at other positions, I think you got to feel better about whoever would take over as a quarterback if Jordan were to go down. Because listen, Rodney Hill, my Lord, he could. There are guys that are going to be battling for. Trey Benson's going to have to work his butt off to keep Rodney Hill off the field. Now, I know Mike's going to play multiple backs. We've seen him do that since he's gotten here. But we're talking about at almost every position, people are going to be competing for reps in the ball game. And I don't think we haven't thought that way in a long time around Florida State's football program. I think you're right, Curt. I think if you had to go in, you do feel better about whoever goes in the ball game. And of course, Tate proved his mettle against Louisville and came in, did a more than admirable job to help FSU get that very important win. And you can remember how Mike Norvell reacted after that game. I think he was about as happy after that Louisville win as maybe any game we saw him last year.
Wasn't it the slam the table and I knew we could win with Tate? A good slam the table, just like a let out of I think that he knew that was something hanging over their heads a bit with how Tate handled things previously when Jordan went down.
Yeah. And remember now, Mike took a heck of a risk by not going to the portal last offseason to get a backup quarterback.
I don't think it was a risk. I don't think you could get a good player to come in. We're going to disagree on that just because I don't think you're getting a player to come in knowing they're going to back up Jordan, at least a player you want. But
I think within the staff there was some hands slammed on the table because Mike got tired of his assistants suggesting they go get a quarterback.
Yeah, I think that, and also all of us suggesting that they go get a backup quarterback. Listen, Curt, to your point, it might be hard to find
It would.
Starting caliber quarterback to come
Yes.
in, but certainly you can find a veteran quarterback who's going to be relegated to backup role at his existing school that's looking for a new opportunity. I do think that you could go in and find a Graham Mertz, for lack of a better, or Alex Hornibrook. Any quarterback from Wisconsin.
Yeah, so
Graham Mertz wanted a place
pass,
where he could
hard
start.
pass.
Graham Mertz wanted a place where he could start.
I think we're going to get that same difficulty at linebacker. I think you got 3 established linebackers, and how many guys are going to want to come in? And
it's easier there
Well, that's
because
good.
you play 2 or 3 at a time and you rotate. But your point is valid that they have 3 established. I think you have a 4th you really like in Omar Graham, and I think that's I mean, as things stand, you're 2 deep. I think you feel pretty good about the 2 deep. The questions on linebacker are if injuries happen, which they always seem to in one way or another. And just, I mean, how deep is your rotation going to go? Are you really going to limit it to 4? Because beyond that, you'd be playing a true freshman as things currently stand.
Well, listen, you're talking about being 2 deep in a 4-2-5 defense. All right.
Yeah.
So
Well,
if they play 4-3, which we've seen them do in the fall and spring, they are hamstrung. I mean, they
probably wouldn't as things currently stand. I agree with you. I don't think you'd see much of it.
Yeah, listen, I don't think it's as we see guys enter the portal on a daily basis. I don't think it's going to be that hard to go out and find a linebacker that wants to play on a winning program. He may not listen. And if a kid comes in and beats that, listen, there's nothing that says Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach and DJ Lundy cannot be beat out. I mean, and listen, if they're here on April 30th, they're here on May 1st, and they're here on August 1st, and they're here on September 1st. So get to April 30th and get to all ACC linebackers from somewhere else. Listen, these kids are. It's funny to me that all these kids have aspirations of going to the NFL where they're going to have to compete for jobs. We want to make sure, and I'm not saying that's the situation but to your point, I'm not saying that's the individual situations at Florida State. But these kids, they say they want to compete, but then if somebody transfers in, they transfer out. We've seen that happen here already. The competition is going to happen in life, whether it's at college, the NFL, or working at Publix. There's going to be competition. There's going to be people that want the job that you have.
Well, hey, going back to your question about concern on offense, I don't think this is a reach, but when you're attempting a field goal,
you took it from me. No.
Is that
all right?
I guess that
I'll
is
pass it over to you.
No.
You've been reading
That's a special teams concern.
You've been reading the message board.
But as soon as you line up to kick that field goal or extra point, it now becomes, even though it's special teams, to me it's offense.
I think we need to add depth at long snapper.
They count those points as offense. So
the good news for Florida State in that regard is that Jimbo Fisher's not here anymore with his 4th down math that we may say is a bit outdated.
Well, and I'm glad because Jimbo's getting awful close to getting ready to challenge writers and football analysts and recruiting analysts to fistfights like he did fans when he was on the back end of his stay here. So, Curt, I'm glad he's not here because I'm liable to ask a stupid question.
Hey, I like to think that if that happened here, we would be we need an Osceola question. We need a high level. We need an Osceola question.
Of course, unlike the fan, I would have been willing to meet Jimbo in the parking lot. So I've known him for a long time. So.
Oh, I bet the fan was willing. Jimbo's got his little side door exit that the head coach probably goes out of.
Yes, I'm sure he does. Well, he certainly does have a side door exit in Tallahassee. There's no doubt about that.
Pat, I believe he was your head coach at Samford, wasn't he?
No, he was a quarterback coach, and I was playing offensive line. But I don't dislike Jimbo. I don't like the way he left here. But anyway, I don't want to fight Jimbo. Listen, if I threw one punch at the air, I'd be sore for 3 weeks, let alone at another person. I mean, come on. I'm too old to fight at this point in my life. But listen, I just don't want Curt to ask Jimbo something that he doesn't want to be asked because apparently Jimbo's all in his fills this week about what kind of questions he takes, and he does not like Sports Illustrated for some reason. But anyway, I digress. I don't know how we got off this.
Okay, Bob, talk about the kicker.
Yes, go.
No, I just, when you think about it, there aren't questions on the offensive side of the ball. The only one I would mildly suggest is outside of Maurice Smith, who do you feel is your dependable backup center? Because we did see a lot of snaps that were disrupting the rhythm of plays. And I don't want to throw guys under the bus because when you're cross-training guys in the spring, you're putting guys who have never snapped before out there, and it just wasn't functional. So who do you count on? Is it Darius Washington? Who is it there, for example? You have to find a backup center who you can count on. I think Darius might be that guy. So it's not a huge worry. It's just something to watch. From a kicker standpoint, I think we've all kicked around this one. Why does Mike Norvell go for it on 4th down? It's because he knows why you have fewer possessions on average nationally right now in college football, because scoring is up, because drives are longer. So he's going to go for it less. But there were also times where I think he said, hey, Ryan Fitzgerald ain't kicking it all that great right now. It's 4th and whatever. We have a play we feel good about. We think we can block it up, run or pass or whatever. We're going for it. And there might be times where that's the right call, but there's also times where, hey, you might just want to kick it because it's 4th and an unrealistic number. Is it Ryan Fitzgerald? Is it Tyler Keltner? We'll see. But to Jerry's point, offense points are going up on the board because of kickers too. I do think that's one of the biggest offensive questions that we have going into the fall.
Did either of them look better? Like, I felt like there was some back and forth where Keltner would be better one day, Fitzgerald would be better one day. I didn't think there was like a definitive, oh, he's the front runner coming out of spring. And I think if Keltner doesn't come in and like really show he's the front runner, I think it's going to be Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll get into one of them kicks from the left hash, one of them kicks from the right hash. I mean, maybe we'll have rotating kickers. It worked for Bobby Bowden with quarterbacks back in the late 70s, early 80s, and maybe that's how we hash it out. Whoever's got the hot leg. Whoever gets the hot leg.
Hey, let me say this. If you could forget that period where he missed a lot, and it's hard to forget, but remember he had gone to a 2-step approach that Gano had convinced him of. And then when he got a problem with it, he didn't know how to fix it. And he went back eventually to the 3-step approach. And I think his percentages, we should break that down. I think his percentages were pretty good after he went back to the 3-step.
I think he only missed one inside of 40 yards after he changed his technique back.
Right. Yeah.
I think. So definitely improvement. But I'd still argue there's, again, this spring they weren't consistent enough.
Right.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to get in. We got a couple of comments. We're going to talk about those here in a few minutes. But all right, so let's talk about the offensive or defensive player, either one in totality on each side of the ball or one from each position group that left the biggest impression on you coming out of spring individually. And I'll start. Since I'll go with offensive line, I'm going to go Jeremiah Byers. I think we saw all that. Bob, you and I talked about pass blocking, and particularly when they're doing the blitz stunt pickup work, he seemed like a natural. You can see all that experience paying off. So I think he was very good at that, and we like his athleticism, all those things. Rodney Hill, just because every running back, again. That's all we ever heard. Rodney Hill. I mean, we did not hear as much about Trey Benson or Toa Feely or C.J. Campbell. But so Rodney Hill there. Then really because he surprised the living hell out of me because I thought he was so slight coming in that he would need a year to add a little bit more weight on his frame. But I'm going to go with Vandrevius Jacobs. Then I'm going to stick with my man Biscuit at tight end. Everybody's discounting Biscuit, and Biscuit's going to hold on to that job. He's going to play because they're going to do some different things. But anyway, I'm going with Biscuit at tight end, and I'm going with Brock Glenn at quarterback. Have I missed any other positions on offense? I think I got them all. So those are my 5.
I'll stick to one player. I mean, I talked about him earlier. I'll go Kentron Portier. I think he was my most impressive player of the spring. I mean, Johnny was a little limited as spring game went on. Obviously, didn't play in the spring game. And I think Kentron, showed he is the closest thing to Johnny they have on this roster he's, I think 6'3". He's not quite as big as Johnny, but moves well, can make some really impressive. That one-handed catch he made in the spring game was, it showed the fan base a lot of what we've seen all spring. He's probably had about multiple sensational catches like that a week. Probably drew more reactions from the sidelines in 1-on-1s or in 7-on or an 11-on with his plays than I think any other player probably did this spring.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you wish that other kid had stayed a little bit longer, giving himself more time to develop, that transferred out of the program last year. Yeah, that was similar in size and talent to Kentron. So
honestly, he may have seen who Kentron was and been like, am I able to compete right now? I mean, he wanted a bigger part. I think he wasn't going to get the number of catches he wanted kind of going into year 3, but it's tough. That's what happens as the roster improves. You lose good guys you would probably rather not lose.
That's right. And they did all right with who they got out of the high school ranks. So we'll be good there. Then they brought in 2 tight ends that can play wide receiver. So, but yeah, so you're right. But yeah, he was pretty good this spring. You're right. He started showing some of the potential we saw him as a high school player. All right, Bob, who you got?
Yeah, I think all the guys you named, but Kentron to me was the star. Almost every day he made a really, really remarkable catch, contested catch. And I think he made most of the easy routine ones too. I mean, I think there were times where everybody has drops, but I just thought Kentron was very, very consistent day in, day out. And then the second guy, Pat, you mentioned him, Rodney Hill is just what a find he was. I know everybody who follows recruiting was questioning why Rodney Hill, why the small school Georgia private high school running back, why was he the right fit? Was he too small? Would he be able to add weight? Would he be able to pass protect? I think he's answered a lot of questions. I think he's got some crazy elusiveness, and still think he should be a return guy in addition to being a running back. But I think we can tell why Rodney Hill is going to get some playing time this fall.
Yeah, that's one of those things, Bob, where we make the all of our assumptions based off huddle highlights, and where we didn't see him in high school in person as a high school player. Then you start to see him in person as a college player and realize that in person he's faster than what you see on film. And so, I agree with you on Rodney Hill. He's obviously, he was my running back that stood out. But anyway, I can remember saying, well, I'm not sure about that signing. And then it became very apparent that evaluation was the correct evaluation that Mike and his staff made. I'm with you there. Jerry, who you got?
Well, I agree with y'all on Rodney Hill. I was impressed by C.J. Campbell too. You don't go in expecting much, and he'll be a factor before it's over. At receiver, I'm with Van Drevius again. That one day of mat drills, tour duty, when we watched that, he really caught my eye. I mean, he just looks different in terms of the program he came out of. They must have an off-season conditioning program, because he's in good shape, he's competitive, and he's quick. And then that translated right onto the football field this spring. I also thought, along with you guys, Portier is a guy I've been excited about for a couple of years now, and I thought he put it together this spring. I think that guy's an NFL player. And then I thought Johnny Wilson took a step forward this spring. To me, he was kind of I don't want to say a one-trick pony last year, but I think this spring has enabled him to develop there's more dimensions to him now as a receiver than there was last year. So really excited about the receiver group. I'm with you, Pat, on Byers. He's different. Guys that caught my eye there real quick, Estes has improved. I like Laureano.
You mean Armella?
Yeah, Armella. I always want to call him Laureano.
You can call him back to 1993 and Juan Laureano.
Yeah, I was thinking. You'd think I'd call him Hernandez,
or Enzo, his father.
But no. I mean, Armello he's going to be a factor before it's over this fall, and then Washington's got to be he's your Gumby. I mean, when you look at the center, to Bob's concern with Smith, Washington's that guy that, he's not as big as you'd like at center, but until Sapp is ready to go.
Yeah, listen, I think they're going to move Darius inside to one of the guard positions, and he'll be your second team center as long as Maurice is healthy. I think Maurice kind of staved off any chance at him not being the starter in spring from what we saw. And I think you find with Bless and Jeremiah and Robert Scott and Armella, I think that Washington's got a chance to move inside, which if he's got to go inside the center from guard, it's an easier transition to make. You work with the guards in tandem a little bit more than at center than you do tackle. So I think that's where they're going to end up with him.
And I think the big thing, Pat, you being a former center, you can comment on this, but setting the calls on the line of scrimmage and studying the film and all the institutional knowledge that Smith has, you don't take him out and put Sapp in there and expect to get the same results, or put Roddick in there. I think with Washington, at least you've got some year, starts.
Yeah,
and you gotta, and Washington's a smart kid. So I imagine his ability to get you in the right blocking scheme is superior to anybody else you got on your roster.
Yeah, he started at left tackle, right tackle, and center over the course of his career. So he's definitely but you would like to see that guy get a chance to settle in at one position at some point.
Yeah, you would. I don't know. In terms of an athlete, he might be as good as there is on that offensive line.
Well, yeah, if he's not your starter, one of your starting tackles, don't you have to move him inside? I think
you got to get him on the field.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, and then at tight end, I'm with you on everything you guys said, but the thing I wanted to see and got to see is the versatility of Bell. They put him in the Wildcat, they put him at tailback. It's impressive, and it's just got to be fun to have that guy as an offensive coordinator. Things you can do with him is fascinating.
Yeah, and the attention he's going to take from defenses is going to open opportunities for other players on the field. Yeah, it's got a chance to be a fun offense.
Well, as a defense, you're sitting there and you don't know when he's in the huddle. Is it going to be 11, 21?
Right.
You got no idea. They can go trips on you. There's no pre-snap tendency until they actually break the huddle in a lineup.
Yep.
Well, and I talked about it with the front row null guys when I went on with them earlier this week. They're going to be able to use those formations, different formations, heavily in certain games, depending on what defense they're going against. They'll be able to be so versatile in how they game plan because of all the different pieces they have, that it might be a tight end heavy week against one team, and then the next week's a very run heavy week, or there'll be so much mixing and matching they're able to do, and their scouting, their in-game game planning, I think has been really impressive and will be on display this fall.
Well, the advantage is you can run so mmany different formations with the same 11 guys in the game. It's just going to be such a big advantage for Florida State because, like Jerry said, and you said, Curt, is that's 11. That's what we consider 11 personnel, but they're so versatile. They can go empty. They can go 21. It's going to be fun to watch. All right, moving over to defense. I'm not going to go through the entire roster. I'm going to go newcomer. Two newcomers, but one's a veteran newcomer. Darrell Jackson, to me, as Jerry said, has a chance to be a dominant player. We've all seen it. Now listen, I think he made a healthy Fabian Lovett. I think that's the first time we've really seen Fabian healthy in a while, which I think made a difference in his spring. But I do think he has served as motivation to Fabian and Josh, who all three of them had great spring practice. But I'm going to go with him. And then my newcomer was Quindarius Jones, who was my favorite recruit. I'm going back. You can go back to our February show and listen to me talk about Quindarius Jones if you want to. And I was right about Quindarius. So I'm sticking with Quindarius. So Quindarius and Darrell Jackson are my defensive guys.
I would nod to Io Tafasi just as a guy who knows how much he's going to play this fall. But as a developmental guy, that's somebody who's got the strength and power and the quick first step that you want to see. I'm with you on everything else. Omar Graham, I think desperately Florida State needed to find somebody who was younger and they could develop. And as Adam Fuller said, they invested a lot in Omar Graham last fall. He wasn't the scout team guy. They really put a lot of reps into him, preserved the red shirt, but you could tell it paid off this spring. He's a guy who, yes, it's a drop off from a Kalen DeLoach or a Tatum Bethune to an Omar Graham, but that's because of playing time. That's because of practice time too. And I feel like Omar is a guy that they are developing in all the right ways to step into a bigger role down the road.
We're all picking different defensive tackles. Is probably, speaks to what we've talked about with the depth in that room. I'm going with, you talked about him. I think Josh Farmer may have been the single most impressive defensive tackle in that room. And not to take away from Daryl, who had his moments, and Fabian, who had his moments in Io, but it just felt like every day you could count on Josh Farmer to make a few plays out there. He talked to us about, I think, how valuable his playing time, probably more than he thought he was going to get last year, getting thrown into things when Fabian Lovett went down and missed, 5 games or so? I forget exactly how many Fabian missed. But I thought he was just an impactful guy day in and day out, and a different linebacker. I'm going to throw Kalen DeLoach in there. If Saturday's showcase was a game, he probably had 2 touchdowns. He had the interception, and then he forced and recovered a fumble that I think would have been a touchdown as well. And I think they are very high on him, and rightfully so. I think when you look at the pro prospects of that group, I think he's a guy who has the most to gain from coming back, being very impactful this year, just with all the different things he can do. We've seen him as a quarterback spy. We've seen him be effective We've seen him be effective in coverage. We've seen what he can do as a blitzer. He really checks all the boxes you're looking for in a linebacker. And I think the coaching staff it seems like from how Adam Fuller talked about him, he can take that to even another level if he can kind of play at a consistent, very impactful level this fall.
Yeah, I would say
anybody else got any standouts on defense?
Yeah, I would say my newcomer is Edmonds, to be a little different than the rest. I think we need a defensive end that can get after the passer, and I think Edmonds can be that guy. That would be a newcomer, just to be different than y'all. I would agree with the interior guys that y'all named. Absolutely true. And DeLoach. DeLoach is the most dynamic linebacker we've had here, in my opinion, since Telvin Smith. And I think he can he really can improve his stock this year, depending on how Adam plays him.
He's a great case in today's college football, where he may have felt pressure and then pre-NIL era to go make some money, and that he's able to make money and, could significantly boost his draft stock, because I'm not sure he would have been a top 3 round pick. And I think he could with a really impactful fall this time next year. Yeah.
And then it's safety. I tell you, I really became impressed with Shaheem Brown in a different way. Like, that was a guy when he was recruited, everybody's going, well, his head coach thinks he fits the mold of the dynasty era, and former player. And he had a great play against LSU. He was very solid, instinctual player last year. I thought he took a step forward this spring. I think he's a guy that could be when you look at him with his shoulder pads off, he's a big kid. He's not a small safety. He's a good sized guy. I think he's like 217 pounds, 6'2". So he's a big joker, and he's got great instincts. So Shaheem Brown caught my eye.
All right. Well, listen, we have seen players enter the portal this week. We saw them enter in the middle of spring. Derek McClain entered the portal after spring break. In the last week, we've seen Stephen Dix, Brendan Gant, Antavius Woody, and Zane Herring enter the portal. By our math, Florida State is at 83 scholarships right now, which means they have 2 to give. They could have more, depending on what happens between now and April 30th. But, guys, you are Mike Norvell and Derek Ray, the FSU head coach and general manager of player personnel. You're sitting in the Moore Center today. You got 2 scholarships to give. Where are you going to utilize those scholarships? And Curt, I'll start with you.
I mean, I do think they'll have more to give. I don't think the transfers are entirely done. I think there are a few more players who could go that route. I know exit interviews. I think it was exit interviews with position coaches this week, and I think Mike Norvell's getting with most of them next year. I think linebacker does. I mean, I think it's right. If you want to use any 3 linebacker personnels defensively at all, you need more depth there. You kind of can't be playing 3 of the 4 non-true freshmen at one time. I mean, and you're banking on no injuries. And I think that is, I mean, y'all were right to highlight that as, I mean, the real question coming out of spring. And truthfully, I'm not sure how much. I mean, I guess Steven Dix or Brendan Gant could have played some, but like, I still think you would have needed more linebackers in terms of guys who you think can play significant reps, even if those 2 were still on the roster. So from a depth standpoint, that hurts you, but I think you already needed to address it. And that just drills home like, oh, you just need numbers there. I think you could stand to add 1 more defensive end. I mean, Derek McClendon's probably the only name on that list who you're really hurting to lose imminently. I mean, he was going to have a role. He has for the last, I think, 4 years at Florida State. I think he played almost 40 games. He's played a lot of football here, and it's a tough loss. And so I think you have some guys you like there, but I think defensive end's a spot you look at. I think you also need to analyze the state of your safety room. I mean, you talked about Shaheem Brown, Jerry, but you're replacing Jamie. You've got Akeem Dent. You've got Amorion Cooper who moved there this spring. You've got, I mean, Travis J is hurt right now, but if he's healthy, maybe he factors in.
KJ Kirkland,
yeah, if KJ Kirkland makes his way back in by the fall, those are all things to monitor, but it's another spot where if you're wanting to kind of use 4 guys and go too deep, you think about maybe an addition there as well.
Yeah, because I agree with you. I'm not sure that the 4 to 5 deep at defensive end that they say they are with McClendon not being there. Now the
wild card I didn't mention is Jaden Jones, who was out this spring, is working his way back from a knee injury, but I think Mike is good to go for the fall, and we'll see, I guess, how he hits the ground running without having spring.
Yeah, and I believe Mike Norvell used that same exact term on Jaden Jones. He is the wild card, and probably one of the reasons that they did not necessarily stress over McClendon leaving. But to your point, he played a tremendous amount of football for Florida State, and I think we would be disrespecting his contribution to the program to say there's not going to be a drop-off with his departure, because I think there is right now on the defensive front at defensive end. But Jaden Jones could be the eraser to that problem if he's healthy and is the player they think he is. But yeah, I think, listen, I've said it all along. And to your point, Curt, you were right. We did have questions about certain backups at linebacker. The fact that these guys have transferred out just exacerbates the problem at linebacker, and I think it's the one hole in this roster that could have a negative impact on the direction of this team next year. Now, to Jerry's point, could they move some guys around? Yes, they could. We'll see how guys develop, but I think right now with 2 to give, certainly if you could find 2 linebackers willing to come to the program that you felt good about, that's where I would go. But if you can only find 1, then I would, to your point, Curt, I go a linebacker defensive end with the 2 they have now. Bob?
I might suggest that you go linebacker if you find the right fit, and then maybe just give the scholarship to CJ Campbell. Why not?
Or Preston Daniel.
Or Keziah or
Dante Anderson.
Yeah, they normally publicize, like, I think, like, we don't know for sure FSU doesn't exactly want to be transparent about if those guys are on or off, but I feel like you always see the videos when they put someone on scholarship. It feels like they'd publicize that. So I tend to think none of them are, and yeah, I think one of them could get on for sure.
And to your point, there's likely to be more that leave.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I don't think we're done with it yet.
No.
With 9 days to go, and if Curt's right and these exit meetings aren't until next week, there's going to be some truth spoken from both sides of the table next week, I would imagine. So we'll see what happens next week. And of course, as we know, recruiting never dies, and Florida State got its first commitment for 2026 yesterday when Devin Carter, a wide receiver / free safety from Cedar Grove High School in Georgia, who just happens to be the son of former FSU running back and NFL running back Dexter Carter, became FSU's first commit for the class of 2026. I don't have a ton to say other than, wow, we're already taking commitments for 2026. The kid's not even a sophomore in high school. Congratulations. As Jerry put on the message board earlier today or last night, the kid does have phenomenal highlight films for a true freshman. But a lot of road to hoe. But, hey, 2026 got the first commitment in the house, and it's a legacy. And I do think it's fascinating, and we can talk about this as we get closer to the season, the impact that legacies could have to rebuilding Florida State's program. You just don't see this every day, the number of legacies at a particular program like we're seeing at Florida State. And I think it could become a very interesting story starting next year and the year after and the year after that, because all these kids that I went to college, all these guys I went to college with, their kids are starting to come to Florida State and play football. So, but any thoughts on Devin Carter and the fact that we are now talking about high school freshmen committing to Florida State?
Well, I can share this. I was speaking with Dexter Senior a lot the last few weeks because of the Billy Sexton dinner that we had, and he told me that his kid had offers from Alabama, Georgia, you name it. He had all these offers, and I was like, I mean, he's in ninth grade, And I mean, I qualified with Dexter. How in the world can they evaluate the kid at that young? And so Dexter told me, as a ninth grader, his team won the state championship, and he was named he made all state as a ninth grader. And I'm like, Dexter's like 5'8". And so I said, well, Dexter, how big is he? Well, the kid's 6'1", 155. And when we took Dexter, he was 5'8", 153, So he's, half a head taller than his dad already. And Dexter has taken him to every camp imaginable. So these coaches have had an opportunity to evaluate him. So it came as I knew he was visiting FSU this past weekend, and Dexter Senior had told me that, if he had a good visit, he wouldn't surprise him if Dex committed. I mean, yeah, not Dex.
Devin.
And sure enough, he committed. So it like you say, it's a long road to hoe. A lot of things can happen between now and then. You can have coaching changes. You can have injuries. You can have any number of things. But I think in Devin, you've got a dynamic playmaker, and golly, he, with the help of his father, that's a kid that ought to really develop between now and the time he's a senior.
Yeah,
and all the camps he'll go to, and he's going to get a lot of good coaching between now and the time he touches down here in Tallahassee.
Well, I just hope everybody doesn't freak out every time he goes on an unofficial visit to another college, because he's
well, they will, Pat, and our click rate will go way up.
I'm gonna start reporting all of those every time a kid goes on an unofficial visit somewhere else. We'll put it on the message board. But anyway, yeah. Hey, by the way, it's a great thing for the family. We've seen it happen to a lot of guys that have played football here, so very happy for that. Obviously, we all personally know Dexter, so to me, it's more relative from that standpoint right now than it is from an actual football standpoint. But we'll see as we go down the road how this all pans out. But listen, I was at the Rivals camp in Atlanta on Sunday, and the two best players of the entire damn camp were rising sophomores. Jakeem Stewart from St. Augustine, Louisiana, by far was the best player there. We'll have offers from every college in America by the end of this fall. And the second best player was Tyler Atkinson, a guy that Florida State has had on campus a ton of times, and they roll out the red carpet for him when he comes to town. He's never greeted by less than three coaches out front of the building. So, and I went to that camp and I found out a little bit about the reason why. So maybe the calendar's just moving along a little bit faster than I can keep up with. But yeah, we are talking 2026 recruits now. But anyway, all right. So Jerry, you kind of mentioned it, and we'll get into some of the things that are going on around campus late for the weekend as we wrap up the show. But you mentioned Coach Sexton, obviously former FSU running back coach Billy Sexton had a stroke a little bit over a year ago. Has been
August.
Okay,
Last August, yeah.
Last August, so not quite a year. But obviously somebody that we all know personally from our time in Tallahassee. Jerry, you worked with him not only when you were at the Osceola the first time and owned the Osceola when in its paper form, and Coach Sexton was coaching for Coach Bowden, but also you guys worked closely together with Seminole Boosters. But had a fundraiser for him, really a weekend for Coach Sexton, where a lot of former players and coaches came back for a dinner on Sunday night at Glory Days, and then I believe you guys hit the Legacy course on Monday for a golf tournament to raise money for Coach Sexton. And just tell us a little bit about the weekend. I know that one of the things we've talked about it was how many former players and coaches and people that have worked with Coach Sexton over the years were back for this thing.
Yeah, we had this whole idea was the brainchild of Andy Miller, who was Billy's boss at Seminole Boosters. And when Billy had this stroke, it's a very severe stroke. He lost use of all four limbs and his speech. And the rehab has been slow and expensive. And Billy's got insurance, but as anybody who's gone through a stroke knows, the insurance doesn't pay for everything. So Joy has been by his bedside every night since it happened. And Andy wanted to give the Sextons a little bit of financial support and just to lift their spirits, because it's been a long, hard road for them and will continue to be. So he did a golf tournament and asked the Osceola if we would sponsor and organize and run the dinner, which of course we did. And we had at the dinner, we had over 50 former players, coaches, including Wally Burnham, Mickey Andrews, and Jim Gladden, a bunch of staff. The women from the booster office in Sioux Hall volunteered their time to do all the heavy lifting. And we put together a dinner that we had 214 seats. And if I had 400 seats, I could have filled them all. A lot of great former players came back. Sammy Smith and William Floyd were our speakers. Deckerhoff emceed it. Warwick Dunn, Charlie Ward. I'll leave out people I don't want to. Kurt Unglob. You go back to Mike Schumann, who both Leon High School guys that played at FSU. Rick Arrear from over in Jacksonville. The varsity club had a table. Boosters had a table. I had notified, this is probably the best story I've got on this. I had notified Mike Norvell that we were doing this event, and I didn't figure he could attend it because of his responsibilities on the weekend, but I wanted him to know that we were doing it. And so he said, I'm going to put it on my calendar. If I can make it, I'll be there. So I didn't promote it. And he offered to send us some items for the silent auction. He sent a FSU football helmet, a football, a jersey, all autographed, all that commanded a lot of money in the silent auction. And then at 6:30, Sue Hall said to me, we had a line to get in. And she says, hey, Jerry, isn't that Mike standing in the parking lot by himself at the end of that line? And I looked out there and it was. So Eric Hayes was with me, former defensive tackle from the 87 team. And Eric and I walked out there and I greeted Mike, thanked him for being there, and asked him if he would come with me inside where there were people that would like to meet him. And he basically told me, I don't roll like that. He thanked me and then and said, nah, I don't jump lines. I'm happy right here. And he stood out there in that line for 20 minutes. About 10 minutes, he was halfway through the line, and Bob Fry, who works with Glory Days, one of the owners of that, he approached Mike independently and said, "Hey, Coach, how you doing? I got some people inside I'd like to introduce you. Would you come with me?" And Mike told him, "I don't roll like that. I'm no better than anybody else. I'm enjoying talking to the fans." And I was just thinking to myself while this was happening, I was sweating it because, you don't want your head coach standing in line waiting. And I thought, this is not good. But he was perfectly happy.
Yeah. Could you imagine Jimbo standing outside waiting to get in?
No.
and that goes to most head coaches. I mean, most head coaches, they live in their own little bubble. And so that is kind of an interesting story. I don't know if most people realize that most head coaches would probably want to be brought in through the side door or
sure. He wanted to be with the people. And then once he got inside, he mingled and mixed with everybody. And he said he was only going to stop in for a few minutes, but he got caught up in conversations and he was there for better than an hour and was, enjoying himself. So I think fans need to know that's the kind of head coach you got. And I was reminded of a guy I talked to. He called me one day. He said, "You'll never guess who I met in the line going into the Miami function." I said, "Who's that?" He said, "Mike Norvell." He was standing in line to get into his own event.
And he's a keynote speaker.
And wouldn't jump the line. He said, "I couldn't believe it." So, and in fact, I didn't believe him when he told me the story until now.
Oh, Mike Norvell, man of the people.
When he talks about unselfishness being a quality he looks for in a fit with a prospect, it'll resonate better with me now.
And of course, what makes it strange is he was a college wide receiver, and most wide receivers are not like that. They like the preferred attention.
Yeah.
Well, he was a D2 receiver,
but he was a very good D2 receiver.
He was a very good D2 receiver, but
left that school as its leading receiver. Central Arkansas.
Somebody raised him with proper manners.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
hey, by the way,
he did a good job. Good job.
We do have. You have a Charlie Ward story. I don't know if you want to share it. We talked about. You don't have to share it if you don't want to.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll share it real quick. I called Charlie Ward to ask him if he'd autograph a football for the silent auction, because he was coming, and he said absolutely. I'll do that. And he said, in fact, I've got a ball. I'll bring it. And so I said, okay. Well, I've got one. You bring one. That'd be good. And so he brought it, and it was a Heisman Trophy football. And it had 21 I didn't realize this until I looked in the bag. And it was authentication certificate, and it had 21 Heisman Trophy winners autographed on that ball. And Charlie told me it was the last one he had, but he wanted to donate it to the silent auction for Billy. The ball auctioned on live auction for $10,000. And just a tremendous act of generosity, both on the part of the donor, Mark and Ann Hillis, but also on the part of Charlie Ward. But anyway, it was a night like that. And at the end of the night, I had former players coming up to me, and Tony McDuffie, who's the wife of Wayne McDuffie, she had tears in her eyes and said, "This is the best FSU event I've ever been to." And then I had at least 10 others come to me and say the same thing. And, I asked why. What made this event special for you? Because I'm in the grind of trying to put out fires and get a coach out of the parking lot and into the room. And so I don't notice the things that make it good. But, it was that they all said they just were all made to feel appreciated. And I think that it starts with Billy Sexton. There's a guy that everybody loves. You wouldn't get 50 people come back for that event unless he was, well-liked. And as Andy Miller once told me, people give to people for causes they believe in. And that was a cause that people believed in. And so it was a very good event. The golf tournament the next day was Greg Jones was at that one. And every time he got near the tee box, I found cover.
Hey, I played with Cal Sporosky on Friday at Letterman's Club. I ducked for cover too.
Well, I mean, listen, Greg can hit it, but man, he hits it hard, as you can imagine. And Ward Dunn's got a good swing. I mean, they're athletes. So.
Yeah, well, I got a Charlie Ward story from Friday at the Letterman's Club. All right, so Jimmy Jordan and I have been good friends since I met him 7 or 8 years ago for the first time at watching Florida State game at a friend's house. Of course, I can remember being a kid when Jimmy was playing, and he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And, this is like 1979, 1980. So the first time I ever met Jimmy, obviously, it was almost like I'd gone back in time, was a kid again. But I'm sitting there drinking beer with him, talking about football, which again, he was 10 years older than I was. So anyway, long story short, I've gone off and on to the varsity club golf tournament over the last 10 years when I've been in town. So I show up Friday to go to the golf tournament, and Jimmy says, well, listen, I don't have an assigned team for you, but I'm going to find a place to put you. Somebody's not going to show up before this whole thing gets started. So about 10 minutes before they're ready to tee off, he calls me and he goes, you need to go up to the right and go to cart number 1. You're going to replace whoever's has not shown up for that group. So I get close to the cart and I can read the name. And the name says Charlie Ward. So I run back to Jimmy and I say, Jimmy, there is no way I can walk up to this group of 4 people who have just paid, I don't know how much money to play golf with Charlie Ward and introduce myself as, by the way, you're playing golf now with me, Pat Burnham. I don't know how to do that. I mean, pick somebody else for me to replace. Send another player to that cart that's maybe lesser known. Let me replace Dan Mowry or Richie Andrews in their group. Send them to Charlie's cart. So I walk up and I was like, guys, I said, I just want to come introduce myself. I'm going to be your 5th today. I'm replacing Charlie, who is not here. And so I tell him who I am, and one of them's an Osceola subscriber, and he goes, well, I recognize your name. And so we go through all that, and of course it's a foggy morning in Southwood. And so I'm like, listen, guys, I know you got to be disappointed. I mean, I don't even have a trophy from high school, let alone a Heisman trophy. I said, so I know you're disappointed, but I said I can be entertaining, and from time to time I hit a golf ball pretty good, so we'll make the best of it. So they had reluctantly begun to accept the fact that they went from playing to from a Heisman Trophy winner to a non-trophy winner. And so out of the gray mist comes this slender figure with a golf bag on his shoulder, and it's Charlie Ward. He lives on the first hole of Southwood. And I got out of having to play in his group, and I've never been so happy in my life because those people would have been disappointed for 4.5 hours. So I ended up playing with a former baseball player, and Paul and Kaz Porowski. But anyway, I do want to appreciate Charlie because I would have been so worried that I was going to ruin that foursome's day that I don't think I ever would hit a ball straight. But anyway, that's my Charlie Ward story from the Letterman's Club golf tournament. And I know I tried. Charlie, I don't think knew what was going on, so I tried to make a joke of it with him, and he just didn't realize what was happening, that they'd sent me to replace him. And
you know what? Pat, he doesn't realize he's anything special.
But I do.
He probably waited in line. He probably waited in line Sunday too, didn't he?
And I also know for a fact that the 4 people that bought his team think he's special.
Yeah. Hey, as Jim Gladden likes to say, humility is the most admired quality in a person. And Charlie certainly has that, and Mike demonstrated it as well on Sunday.
I'm glad Charlie showed up. That was for sure. But
so a great weekend. Lots of, and then on Tuesday, Bob, Curt, and I attended the dedication of 2 more homes donated by Ward Dunn, and that was a special event. So from Friday to Tuesday, We had one heartwarming moment after another.
Well, let's hope that continues as we move forward through the summer and spring. And listen, before we wrap it up, which we're going to do because we've been on here longer than we normally are. Of course, there's two common denominators when we run long, and they're both on the left-hand side of my screen right now, and that is me and Jerry. So, we apologize. Sometimes we dwarf back into our Johnny Carson monologue type situations. So, all right. So we can wrap it up. There are obviously some things going on in the ball and stick sports this weekend. Softball's on a roll still. I guess you could say baseball's on a roll. Just the ball's rolling backwards. What's going on with the ball and stick sports this week? Who's coming into town? Who's leaving town? Who we playing?
Yeah, we got two Florida State Virginia Tech series, and like you said, it might be more entertaining to stay home and watch the softball series than to catch the baseball series. I will say the Wednesday game that Florida State baseball played at North Florida is up there with the wildest nights I've ever watched. I can't remember how many walks. I know there were 6 wild pitches. I know there were 9 pitchers plus Jordan Carrion as number 10.
Which was a program record.
And it was just a crazy, crazy night.
15-14.
They were up 8-5 going into the bottom of the 8th. They gave up 7 runs to go down 12-8. Then they needed 4 to keep the game alive. They got exactly 4 runs to tie it at 12. UNS didn't score in the bottom of the 9th, so it went to extra 12-12. I think Florida State scored 2. Another homer from Cam Smith. I think he had 2 in the game, up to 9 on the season. I mean, he threw it all, turned in a pretty nice freshman season. And then Florida State turned around and gave it 3 in the bottom and lost 15-14 on a wild pitch by Jordan Carrion, who pitched in high school. I think pitched at Florida, had not pitched here. It was a testament to, I mean, when we talk about the razor-thin bullpen depth, this team is not built for extra innings in a midweek game coming off a 3-game weekend series.
As somebody said,
based on the way y'all
7
talk,
innings.
based on the way y'all talked, I'm not sure they're built for 9 innings. I've only been to 1 game, so
they got through 7 pretty well.
All right.
It's tough though, because I mean, I think it was the first time they'd scored more than 5 runs in a game in over a month. Like the offense had been pretty dead, which was surprising. So the offense breaks out, and so naturally the pitching staff falls, which has been, I think, better than expected lately. Kept them in some games despite poor offensive showings. The pitching staff fell apart a bit.
Yeah, and by the way, it did look cold last night in Blacksburg for the women. I mean, Lonnie was in a jacket when they were interviewing her on ESPN, and they're there through Saturday
afternoon.
Yeah, game 1 was last night. They won. Kat Sandercock, an ace of a gem of a start for her.
And who's baseball got again this weekend?
Also VT.
Oh, are they up there?
No, down here.
Okay. All right.
Starts tonight at 8 on ACC Network.
Well, the weather is going to be outstanding for baseball. If you want to get the family out in the sun, some peanuts, some popcorn, some Cracker Jacks, all that good stuff. So go spend some time with the family out at Mike Martin Field. All right, guys. Now we think it's going to be a very light weekend on recruiting, so we will not be stationed outside the Moore Center as we currently know. So I don't. All right, so guys, this is one of the first light weekends we've had in a while. We've pretty much been going 7 days a week since the second week in January. What are your, Jerry, I know you've been going crazy between the Osceola, Springtime Tallahassee, the Billy Sexton event. What are your plans for the weekend? I just saw Daisy make a guest appearance on the show. Yeah. What's your plans for the big weekend?
I'm going to hang out, man, and relax a little bit. And probably write a story for a change.
All right. Bob and Curt, what are your plans for the weekend? I mean,
I'll still be working. I'll be at baseball tonight. I'm ready to Brock Glenn's story. It'll be on the website later today, and I think we'll have some other kind of post-spring debriefing stuff to kind of carry us through the weekend content-wise for the most part.
Well, Bob?
Yeah, I got baseball Saturday, and looking forward to some Braves games. I've not been able to sit down and catch some of the Braves games live. Been forced to 7-minute condensed games, but I think it'd be fun to sit back and catch some more entertaining baseball than maybe what we've been used to of late.
They're playing well. I think they won like 7 or 8 in a row, or 8 of 9, something like that.
Before Sunday or before Wednesday, yeah, they won 8 in a row.
Yep, they're having
Apple TV Plus tonight.
Hey, let me say something about baseball, Pat, real quick. Bob and Curt and Arya and some of our other writers are going to break that down and analyze the heck out of it. And so that's our responsibility as a publication, and it'll be done. But I would caution.
Well, yes, it'll be done more. It'll
be done. But I'll caution our fans that, don't try to read too much into this year. I mean, it's just, it is what it is, as they say. And the beauty of baseball with scholarships the way they are is Link can make some major changes. The guys who are getting it done and who have bought into what he's doing, can stay, and he can move. The transfer portal is there, and the door swings both ways.
Some people, I think, are frustrated at him with the freshman class, and he didn't sign it. They were all on campus there at his opening press conference. He didn't bring any of them in, so he's kind of had to deal with what he inherited this year. And honestly, I think the run to Omaha last year with Notre Dame hurt what they could do through the portal. They tried. They tried to do a little more, but they missed the bulk of that window. Yeah.
Well, listen. There's a couple of things. He wouldn't be here if there wasn't a problem to begin with, right? So they saw this coming. This is Mike Alford's concern, and this is why he made a change. I think it's probably good that Link's getting to go through this with his team and have a better appreciation. And to your point, Curt, I don't think most people understand baseball's recruiting calendar and how that affects his ability to turn this program around. I thought we all do good to understand the football recruiting calendar, let alone baseball or basketball. But listen, I think, don't overreact. Listen, Florida State went 3-6 Mike's first year here. And some of those games were non-competitive, so we know it can be done with the portal. And as we've talked about, the Florida State brand, just like in football, in baseball, gives you a chance to turn it around quicker than you can most places.
Agreed.
Yep. No, I mean, this is an unfortunate circumstance all around. It would not be better with Mike Martin Jr. I've started to see that notion a little bit of I wish he was still here, and it would not be better. It wouldn't. This is, in large part, they're here because of the fall off near the end of Mike Martin Sr. and how things went under Mike Martin Jr. So,
well, listen, I think they're going to be fine down the road. But yes, and listen, it's still a great play. I still love going to Mike Martin Field and watching baseball. It's one of that helps me do a couple things. A, gets me out of the house, and B, practice patience, which is not my strong suit. So I have to sit somewhere. Listen, I'm very disappointed that you guys did not want me covering baseball this year, because some of the longest stories I've ever written in my life are baseball stories.
We didn't need the novels. We didn't need the novels about this team.
Oh, come on. It would have been fun to read some of these. They're not, well, I don't know. We used to write up every score. Like that game Wednesday or last week with the 15-14 game, that would have been a tell of two cities. It would have, y'all been still reading that game story from today if I had written it. But yes. But anyway, guys, I'm going to let you go. We will be covering Florida State this weekend. Curt and Bob will probably be working a little bit harder than I will be. I'm going to be on call as needed. Something will break in recruiting, I'm sure. There will be offers going out. Something's going to happen in the portal. We know somebody's going to announce one way or the other. We've already started seeing college kids like Brendan Gann announcing who they've gotten offers from. So we'll probably hopefully see Florida State throw out some offers to guys in the portal. We'll see how that works out. But as always, if you're not a subscriber to the Osceola, but listen to our podcast/videocast, we would ask that you go to floridastate.rivals.com or theosceola.com and check us out. We do have articles that are not behind the paywall. Certainly some recruiting articles there. Got our premium message board. Curt's got a column on where Florida State is from a scholarship number standpoint. We got an article on Devin Carter committing to Florida State yesterday. Guys, any other articles or newsworthy items you want to promote as we get ready to leave the air here on Friday, April 21st?
We're going to put up a bunch on the Sexton story on the Sexton with a photo gallery. of a lot of the players that were back for that. So that if you want to look at some of that, that'll be up there in the next day.
Well, listen, we apologize if we know we run a little bit long, but there's a lot of knowledge coming out of these four heads. So we hope you've enjoyed. Well, maybe not knowledge, maybe a lot of
knowledge.
Maybe a lot of opinion. Some knowledge, lots of opinions. But guys, y'all have a great weekend. We will be back on Monday in some form or fashion. Who knows who's going to lead, what we're going to talk about. But we'll be back at 12:30 on Monday with another live version of Seminole Sidelines for Curt Weiler, Jerry Kutz, and Bob Ferrante. I'm Pat Burnham. We appreciate you listening. And please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com and check us out and have a great weekend.
All right.